Welcome to Maine Voices live stream. Before we begin, some messages from our sponsors.
Hey Maine, how are you? Yes, you. How are you really? It's a question we rarely ask ourselves. But to Northern Light Health, how you are means a lot. So we're out here asking and encouraging you to ask the people in your life, starting with yourself. So ask away. Then connect with us at northernlighthealth.org/howareyu.
Good evening. I'm Lisa DeSisto, CEO of the Maine Trust for Local News and the publisher of the Portland Press Herald. Thank you for being with us tonight for Maine Voices Live Stream, and we appreciate your pivot to live stream. It's great to have that option. This event and the journalism that we produce every day is made possible by you, our subscribers, along with our sponsors and advertisers. We appreciate your support of our work. And I would like to acknowledge the presenting sponsor, Northern Light Mercy Hospital, for being with us to bring you Maine Voices Live. I would also like to acknowledge Sam and Betty Novick of Hub Furniture. I hope you are resting comfortably tonight in a piece of furniture that you purchased at Hub. They've been in business, after all, for 110 years, serving Portland. Tonight, Ray Routhier gets the gig to interview our guest, Dale Arnold. And Ray has an unbelievable beat. He covers pop culture, entertainment, music, TV, and writes features for us in both the Press Herald and the Maine Sunday Telegram. I hope you had a chance to read the piece that he did on the revival of Belfast's Colonial Theatre. And if you missed it, we've conveniently popped a link in the chat for you. So tonight's guest is Dale Arnold, a former NESN sportscaster. Dale went to Bowdoin College, where he got his start calling play-by-play for Polar Bear Sports. And he has come full circle now, living back in Brunswick. Dale is the only person to have called play-by-play for all 5 of Boston's sports teams: the Red Sox, the Bruins, the Patriots, the Revolution. He has done it all, and you are in for a treat tonight. So please welcome to your screen, Dale Arnold and Ray Routhier.
Thank you, Lisa. Hello, everybody. Thank you very much for joining us tonight on a snowy night in Maine. And thank you, Dale, for joining us from, I don't know if that's the Boston Garden or where you are with the Bruins shirt in the background.
This is my wife always said, we're not having a man room, Dale. And we didn't set about having a man room, but after the Bruins gave me that when I retired, I had to put it somewhere.
It's beautiful. And I just want to remind people that there'll be, if you have questions for Dale, you can put them in the Q&A location at the bottom of the screen. And if you have to step out for any reason, this will be recorded. So you can watch it at any time on our website. And I just want to start, Dale, in his long career in Boston sports, has basically talked to all the most legendary Boston sports figures, sort of the Mount Rushmore of Boston sports. He's talked to or interviewed people like Ted Williams, David Ortiz, Bobby Orr, Bill Russell, Larry Bird, on and on. So I want to start by asking about a legendary Boston sports figure who's in the news a lot right now, and that's Bill Belichick, coach of the Patriots, former coach, which sounds really weird to say, of the New England Patriots. And Dale, I know you used to interview him weekly on your radio show on EEI. So I just wondered if you could tell people, what was he like, both, at the mic, but off the mic, when you talked to him?
Well, on the mic, he was what you see standing at the podium a lot of the time. He is nothing if not disciplined, and he's not going to say anything that he doesn't want to say, and you're not going to goad him into saying something that he doesn't want to give up. Off the mic, totally different human being. And I will tell you a quick story. My son was getting married in New Orleans and honored me by inviting me to be his best man at his wedding. And his soon-to-be wife came from a long line of New Orleans Saints fans. And I interviewed Bill on Monday, and we were leaving on Tuesday to fly down to New Orleans and spend the week down there and get ready for the wedding. And I fought back and forth about whether I was going to ask. And my partner, Michael Holly, said, Dale, ask him, just ask him. So the interview ended, and I said, Bill, I normally wouldn't do this, but I've got to ask you. And I brought out one of these footballs, and I said, my son's getting married this weekend in New Orleans, bunch of Saints fans. Is there any way you would consider signing this? And he said, oh, God, yes. And he sends Burge down to get the special pen and everything. And he wrote a beautiful inscription to my son, Taylor, and his wife, Lauren, and signed it Bill Belichick, and then put the years that they won the Super Bowl championships. And when I gave my best man speech, and I got to hand that off in New Orleans to a room full of Saints fans, you should have heard the place. But he was gracious, he was kind, and he said, I would love to do that, and he did. And yeah, he's really a funny guy. People don't believe that. Big hockey fan. The mics would go off, and he'd say, Dale, what's going on with the Bruins? Big fan of Claude Julien. What's going on with the team? How's the defense holding up? He'd love to talk hockey with me a lot of the time when we weren't on the air.
Wow. What happened to that ball? Does that have a place of honor in your son and daughter-in-law's house?
They're both professors at the University of Richmond in Richmond, Virginia, and it is on the shelf in their living room to this day. So wow. The Saints fans allowed it to survive the wedding, and they all got kind of a kick out of it.
Of all the incredible people that you've talked to, I wonder, do you have one or two favorite interviews that you've done, and if you could talk a little bit about why they're your favorite?
I worked in the old Boston Garden, before they tore it down and built what is now the TD Garden. And I went to the back door of the Bruins dressing room one day, and I paced 12 paces to the back door of the Celtics locker room. That's how close they were in the old Boston Garden. And I said to Ray Bork one day, I said, you play in the same building. Your dressing rooms are 12 paces apart. You had to have spent some time talking to Larry Bird before. And he said, I've never met him and I've never talked to him. And I thought, what if I could make that happen? So I invited both of them to come into their studio with me, the radio studio at EEI. And I literally Ray got there first. Larry got lost a little bit and was 5 minutes late. And Larry Bird walked in the door of the studio, and I literally got to say, Ray Bork, this is Larry Bird. Larry Bird, this is Ray Bork. And then just get the heck out of the way and let them talk for the next hour, which is what I did. And it was the best time. And I just love the interaction. Now, one played hockey, one played basketball, but there were so many similarities. Great players, Hall of Fame players, work ethic, dedication to the craft, how you go about preparing yourself in the off seasons. They had a lot to talk about, and I had so much fun just listening to them.
Did they mention whether they play each other's sport? Like, for some reason, I can't see Larry Bird playing hockey in Southern Indiana.
No, Raymond is a guy who literally played whatever sport was in season. If it was baseball season, he played baseball. In fact, he always said to me, he did not like hockey parents who had kids skating 11 or 12 months out of the year. He thought it was bad for them. So he could have played basketball at one point or another, although the seasons between basketball and hockey would have, conflicted. I can pretty much guarantee you Larry Bird had never been on hockey skates and probably hasn't been to this day either.
So how did you get interested in broadcasting? I mean, is this something that you thought about when you were a little kid, and do you remember what put that into your head?
Well, the joke is that when I realized I wasn't going to become the center fielder for the Red Sox, I had to figure out another way that I could be in sports and still make a living. By the way, I was disabused of that notion at a fairly early age. Um, I, I liked the idea of trying to become a broadcaster. I was lucky enough. The radio station in Brunswick, back then it was WCME, became WKXA later on. I got a job there when I was 15, and my friend Bruce Viette got a job there when he was 15 or 16, and he helped me get in the door. And they let us do Brunswick High School football games. And I'm 15 years old with a voice that sounded like it should be saying, "Hi, Mr. Disney." And I'm calling Brunswick High School football. And it gave me a chance to get my foot in the door. I then got to do other things. Later on, we added Bowdoin College hockey to the docket, and I got an opportunity to do that. The first hockey game I ever saw live in my life, I broadcast. It was a Bowdoin Northeastern game at Matthews Arena in Boston, but I was hooked. And so I started at a very young age, was able to do it before I was a student in college, while I was a student in college, and that sort of led down the road to the American Hockey League and the Maine Mariners.
How did you call a hockey game if you had never seen a hockey game?
Um, Actually, interestingly enough, the first NFL game I ever saw live in my life, I also broadcast. I had never been to a Patriots game or any NFL game before I called my first game. It's not that I hadn't seen it. I had seen it on TV. I'd never been to a game.
Right,
I'd never
right.
sat there and tried to. And I made probably a bushel full of mistakes and things that I would cringe if I listened back to now. But it gave me a chance to work at my craft, to do it and hopefully improve. And luckily I did improve as things went on and got to keep doing it.
And how did you get the job at Bowdoin? I mean, I can understand Brunswick High School, I suppose, being a high school student, but did somebody recommend you for that, or did somebody hear you doing the Brunswick games?
Yeah, the radio station in Brunswick just added Bowdoin hockey to the schedule, and the interesting note here is that a couple of guys from Minneapolis bought the radio station, Bob Papper and Mike Faring, and they came in and they're doing the big staff meeting, and they said, "Now we notice we've got a football game on the docket for this Friday. Who's doing the football game?" And 16-year-old me sort of raised my hand, and they looked at me and they said, "Well, can you do the game on Friday until we can hire a grown-up?" And or words to that effect. So Friday night, I went and did the Brunswick game. I came back to the radio station, bringing the equipment back after the game on Friday, and they were both sitting there. It was like 10 o'clock, 10:30 at night. And they said, "Listen, we don't have to hire a grown-up. You just keep doing the games."
Wow.
And then they added Bowdoin hockey to the mix, and they said, "Well, you're the guy doing the games on the radio here, so you do that one too." And they let me do it.
Wow. So you were calling Bowdoin games before you went to Bowdoin?
Yeah, I was. And it led to an interesting situation where I was doing the games with a Bowdoin alum named Fred Harlow. And Fred is a wonderful guy. And he kept saying to me, "Dale, you've got to go to Bowdoin." I was a student at the University of Maine, Portland, Gorham. And I was taking classes there, full-time course load. And he said, "You got to go to Bowdoin. You've got to go to Bowdoin." And I said, "Fred, they take like 2 transfer students a year. And, it's ridiculous." And he said, "Well, I'll tell you what, Dale, let's make a bet. You apply to Bowdoin. If you get in, you got to go. If you don't get in, I'll pay your application fee." So I applied. I lost the bet. They let me in. And so I did 3 years at Bowdoin as a student, and that sort of capped my Bowdoin hockey career as well.
Wow. And I wonder, when you were starting out, maybe even before you started doing high school games, were there any particular broadcasters that influenced you or inspired you, that like people you saw on TV or heard on the radio and you thought, that's what I'd like to do. I'd like to be somewhat like that guy?
My broadcasting hero as a kid growing up was Kurt Gowdy. He could do anything and everything. Red Sox, NFL, Olympics. He could literally do anything and be great at it. And interestingly enough, I'm in New Jersey doing the New Jersey Devils games, and the radio station in Boston calls me. And they said, would you be interested in applying to come to Boston and follow Kurt Gowdy as the radio voice of the New England Patriots? It's like, oh, man. I had to acknowledge that I didn't have any football tape because I hadn't done a football game in a long time. I said, all I've got is hockey tape. And they said, send us what you got. I sent them a New Jersey Devils Edmonton Oilers game. And they listened to it and liked it. They took it down to Foxborough because the Patriots had to approve the broadcaster. They listened to me doing a New Jersey Devils Edmonton Oilers hockey game and approved me. And that's how I got the Patriots job, but following Kurt Gowdy.
And did you get to spend any time with him or talk to him?
I got to know him a little bit. At one year for the Olympics, NBC had taken all their announcers, I think it was Seoul, and they had brought back a lot of the alums to do football games. And Kurt was doing the Patriots game against the Green Bay Packers out in Wisconsin. And he had asked, and the Patriots readily said, of course, you can ride back to Boston with us on the charter. Well, I think Dave Wintergrass, who was in charge of all the travel for the Patriots, knew who my childhood hero was. And they had little name tags on the seats when you got on the charter. And my name tag was sitting right next to the name tag that said Kurt Gowdy. And it was, we talked all the way back to Boston. They say, don't meet your heroes because you'll be disappointed. Just the opposite. He was as nice a man as I've ever met. He was so giving and so caring. And we ended up striking up a relationship and a friendship that lasted until his passing. He was everything I ever hoped he'd be. And I just had a blast getting to know him.
That saying about, be careful, or, you don't want to meet your heroes because you're not sure what they're going to be like. I was going to ask you, I know you had mentioned at some point, you started thinking about broadcasting because you realized you weren't going to be the center fielder for the Red Sox. And I think you and I talked before that the center fielder for the Red Sox when you were in high school was Fred Lynn.
Well, I started even earlier than that, but Fred Lynn was who I wanted to be. Yeah.
I wondered, did you ever interview Fred Lynn or somebody else who was a childhood sports hero?
Fred Lynn, I did. And again, the exact same thing. He was my favorite player. I was a center fielder at Brunswick High School in Mount Ararat. He was the center fielder, and I just loved everything about his game. I did get to meet him. I did get to talk to him. I got to know him a little bit, in later years. And much like Kurt Gowdy, as nice a guy as you'd ever want to meet, fun to talk to, gracious, giving. I got to say, that whole thing about don't meet your heroes, in my experience, in my lifetime, is complete bunk. Because every time I've had a chance to meet my heroes, it's been great.
Have you ever been a little either starstruck or intimidated by somebody? I mean, you told me you spent time with Ted Williams, and he seems like, it seems like a great guy, but also there's stories about he could be loud, he could be blustery, he could be crude. And I just wondered what your experience with somebody like that was with Ted Williams.
The first time I got to interview Ted, it was because of Kurt. I had talked to Kurt Gowdy. Ted had not been on anything in Boston for years and years. Radio, TV, didn't talk to reporters. Everybody knows about his legendary relationship with the media in Boston. And I was talking to Kurt, and I said, do you think Ted would ever want to come on and talk fishing sometime? And Kurt said, let me call him. And we had Bud Levitt from the Bangor Daily News and Kurt Gowdy and Ted Williams for an hour on the radio in Boston talking fishing.
Wow.
And it was all because Kurt knew Ted so well. And that was on the phone, that interview. So that didn't intimidate me as much. In subsequent, a few years later, when they were dedicating the Ted Williams Tunnel in Boston, Ted came to town for it. I had an opportunity to interview him live and in person. He scared the hell out of me. I mean, all those things you say. Now, again, wonderful guy, fun. I think the fact that Kurt liked me probably didn't hurt me at all. I was intimidated when I talked to him, and I was intimidated when I talked to Bill Russell. The reputation had preceded him. Wonderful guy, very nice man. Treated me, respectfully, as I obviously treated him. I had a blast talking to him. He had a wonderful laugh, that cackling laugh of his, and he intimidated me a little bit. Ted intimidated me a little bit. I try not to get too intimidated. When I started, the first couple of times I interviewed Tom Brady, he wasn't Tom Brady yet. He wasn't that guy. He was the kid who was just getting an opportunity to play because of an injury to Drew Bledsoe. If I had interviewed him, later on in his career, maybe I'd have been intimidated by him as well. David Ortiz, again, could have intimidated me, but he was such a nice guy and so much fun to talk to that he never did.
What did you talk about with Bill Russell? Was there a specific reason? Because again, he didn't do a lot of interviews, right?
No, he didn't, and I can't remember the specifics of. There was something the Celtics were doing. Maybe it was honoring Red, or I honestly don't remember. It was that far back, but it had something to do with basketball and the Celtics. But I had the opportunity to talk to him, and it was a thrill.
I wanted to ask a little bit about your time doing play-by-play for the Patriots in the late 80s and early 90s, because for maybe younger people in the audience, they don't understand that the Patriots were even worse back then than they were this past year, that they went through a really rough period. And so the whole time you were calling them, they were pretty bad. And I just wondered what that was like, and how did you maintain, your energy, your enthusiasm while calling a team that I think one year only won one game, right?
They did. They went 1-15. One of the years I was there. I was there for 3 seasons, and they were pretty crummy. The first season I did with the Patriots, their final preseason game, they lost Andre Tippett, Garin Veras, and Ronnie Lepet to injury for the season.
Wow.
In the last preseason game. So you had a pretty good idea what that season was going to be like. I did do 1-15, and I remember it's almost like you had a talk with yourself. And I remember saying, I'm not going to offer to give any of the money back that they're paying me. They're paying me this amount of money for this amount of effort and this amount of dedication to what I do. I'm not giving any of the money back. So I owe them what I would be giving them if the team was 15-1 instead of 1-15. It was the work ethic that my dad probably instilled in me, and that, I probably tried to carry forth to my kids as well. And I just felt that I was working in the National Football League. I was broadcasting games at the highest level of the sport. I owed it the respect that it deserved, even if the team's record wasn't very good.
And were there any good things that came out of that time for you, or memorable moments for you?
There was one. It was kind of a funny thing. And because of the strike, the Patriots had brought in Doug Flutie. And there were those who called him a scab at the time. And I remember there was this play, Flutie ran a naked bootleg for a touchdown. And there wasn't a lot to cheer about in those days back at what was the old Schaefer Stadium, Foxborough Stadium. But the place was going nuts after Flutie scored this touchdown. The local kid, the Natick kid, Boston College alum, comes back and scores on this naked bootleg late in the game. And I just out of nowhere, after I described the play, was trying to give people a sense of what the stadium was like, because I was doing radio. And I said, this place has gone Icky Baluki. Gino Capoletti, who was doing
Icky
color.
Baluki? Is that what?
Icky Baluki. Yeah. And Gino Capoletti, who was doing color for me, looked over and he says, what? And I just sort of shrugged at him. And so NFL Films liked that highlight a lot. They ended up using it a lot. And I remember, I think it was Jim Baker of the Boston Herald, the media writer for the Boston Herald, called me the next day on Monday. And he said, where did that come from? And I said, I don't know. It just popped out. He said, how do you spell Icky Baluki? I said, Ickey Balooki. He said, are you sure? I said, Jim, if I make it up, I can spell it any way I want. Yeah. And I did.
And have you ever said anything that spontaneous or unique again?
Well, I'd like to think so.
No, I meant that, like creating a whole word.
No, that just, and I don't know where it came from. I don't know why I said it. I don't remember ever hearing it before then. I don't remember ever having heard it, and I don't think I've heard it or said it since. That's one of those, you retire that one. You do that one, you don't bring that one back later on.
You didn't think about making that your signature call?
Oh gosh, no, I didn't like the idea of signature calls anyway, but it wouldn't have been that one.
And you've done all the major sports. I wondered, now that you're retired, especially if you can talk about what your favorite sport to call is and why.
Easily hockey. And interestingly enough, it's the sport I never played. I was small A athlete in high school, lettered in 4 sports in school, but hockey wasn't one of the sports I played. I was the oldest of 5 kids growing up in a mobile home in rural Maine. My family couldn't think about affording skates and equipment, so I never played. And it was the sport that just grabbed me, and it just I loved everything about it. I've often called it verbal gymnastics. Trying to keep up, and especially when you're doing it on radio. On TV, you don't have to say as much. People can see where the puck is. You don't have to, overwhelm them with details. But when you're calling a game on radio, you're it. And trying to keep up and get the names right and keep up with the pace of the game. It's to me, it's the most fun game to call. It's the fastest of the 5 pro sports that I've called. So in that regard, it's the one that I loved the most.
And yeah, I mean it's when you listen to somebody call hockey, it is really fast and like you say, especially on the radio. Did you have to work up to that, or were you able to? Did you just feel like you came to that naturally, that being able to keep up with hockey?
I'm sure that Bowdoin Northeastern game I did at Matthews Arena wasn't very good, but I did Bowdoin hockey for 5 years. That led to the Maine Mariners of the American Hockey League, and I worked there for 7 years. So, I had 12 years of apprenticeship before I got to the National Hockey League. And you'd like to think that you continue to work on your craft and improve and hone your skills. And by the time I got to the National Hockey League, I felt that I was ready for the position at that point, and I had a blast doing it.
And I know there were times just from watching you when I think when you were calling Bruins games, but you also had the talk show on EEI, and you would go back and forth. And on EEI, whoever your co-host at the time would say, well, Dale's going to be leaving us at 5:30 because he's got to go over to the Garden and get ready for the game. What was that like? How did you balance doing
When I
talk show and a game in the same day?
when I started doing both jobs, the talk show and hockey, I was doing middays, 10 to 2. So it was simple. Get off the air at 2, got all the time in the world, go over to the Garden. And the first year I did hockey on radio, I was doing home and road. But then when I switched over to television to NESN, I was doing home games. So I'd work 10 to 2, then I'd go to the Garden. It really was simple. It was a long day. It was a 18-hour day, but it was a simple thing to do. Later on at EEI, Michael Hawley and I got moved into afternoon drive. But I had already made the commitment to NESN about doing these games, and I made that clear to EEI that I still had to do this, that I had made a commitment. And they were very good about it, very gracious. And Michael was always so cool about covering for me. But I'm going to tell you this, for those of you in Maine who don't have to drive there very often, driving in Boston in rush hour can be a little messy. And especially on a night like this, for instance, there would be times when I'd be barreling out of that building at the radio station and piling in the car and getting to the Garden. And there were times when it was getting to the Garden just in time to sit down and do the game.
And taking working the talk show obviously is very different than calling a game. And I think when people think about sports talk radio, you think about not all the callers are the easiest people in the world to deal with, and they have strong opinions. And I just wondered, are there times that you can remember where you got so agitated or flustered or some other word that you let a caller have it or wanted to let a caller have it verbally?
I'm sure there were. I mean, I don't necessarily stick those in my little box of memories that I pull out and listen to. I mean, I know that there were times when I would get frustrated, and and by the way, everybody's opinion is perfectly valid. Just because it's different than mine doesn't mean it's not a perfectly valid opinion. I just might disagree with it. I remember, for some reason, I remember there was a point where Ray Bork was injured and out of the lineup for a period of time. It might have been a couple of weeks, might have been 3 weeks, whatever it was. And for whatever reason, the Bruins actually did fairly well without him, and he's one of the greatest defensemen who's ever played in the Hall of Fame, but they found a way to everybody pick up the slack, and they did okay without him. And I remember a caller saying to me, well, Ray's supposed to be back for the game on Saturday. What are you going to do with him? I said, you play him. You spend your whole career as a general manager trying to find guys like that. Why the hell would you set him out? And I did get a little hot under the collar, I guess, with that particular caller, because I remember it seemed like such a simple question. It's like, if I got Ray Bork and I can play him Saturday, yeah, I'm probably going to play him Saturday.
Yeah. Well, and that reminds me of over the years, I've heard some great interviews, you and Ray Bork, and you seem to have just a really good relationship with him. And I just wondered, did that just develop from calling games, or did you guys have something else either in common or shared interest or something? Because you seem to almost talk to each other like friends.
I'd like to think we are friends, but I don't want to overstate that. It's not like I go hang around at his house, or
Right.
he doesn't come to my house. There's a professional, friendly relationship. I think it comes from a mutual respect and admiration for the player. I think I always had a similar sort of relationship with Bobby Orr, where, in my mind, the best defenseman who's ever put on skates, and might be the most humble, nicest man I've ever met. And it's like almost shocking how down to earth he is when you finally get to know him. And he's just that kind of guy. I was interviewing him before the All-Star game was coming to Boston, and he said to me, what are you doing for the All-Star game? I said, actually, we're going over to the fan fest. And my son, who was a little kid at the time, 9, 10 years old, is doing a thing for NESN, Fan Fest through the eyes of a child. And he says, well, what time are you going to be there? And I told him, and he says, well, I'm going to be there. He said, come say hi. So we go and watch, and Bobby, I should say, is sitting up on a stage with every camera and microphone from the hockey world pointed at him. And my son and I, Taylor and I, stood at the back of the room and watched the whole thing. And at the end of the whole thing, Bobby saw me and he said, Dale, come here. And he said, I thought I was going to talk to your son. And I said, yeah, there was too much going on. He said, get your camera, get your son, let's go. So we went, and my son interviewed Bobby Orr one-on-one with all of those cameras from all around the hockey world pointed at my son and Bobby Orr.
Wow.
And Taylor asked him a couple of questions, the kind of question a 9 or 10-year-old would ask. And finally, he just sort of stopped, and Bobby said, is that it? My son looked at him and he said, that's it. And Bobby started laughing, and he gave him a big hug, and he said, that's the best end of an interview I've ever heard. But that's what he was like.
Wow.
He had said, come see me, come. And he was going to be interviewed by my 10-year-old son, no matter what.
And did your son become a sports broadcaster because of that?
No, he's a stats professor at the University of Richmond. He's way smarter than me.
Oh, wow. I was going to ask, after living so long in the Boston area doing Boston sports, why you and your wife decided to move back to Maine. If it was something that you were always planning, or was there some specific reason you wanted to come back here?
Yeah, I always joke that we're the only retired people I know who moved north. But we always knew we wanted to come home. My wife was born and raised in Maine. I wasn't born in Maine because my dad was in the Air Force, but I was raised in Maine, junior high school, college, my American Hockey League career. So we always knew we wanted to come home. We always knew we wanted to get back to the state of Maine. You know how special this place is, and it was always a special place to us, and all those years of seeing it as a visitor, but you'd cross that bridge in Portsmouth and your shoulders would relax and you'd just say, okay, now I'm back home again. And that's what we wanted. And that's why we came back home.
So how are you spending your retirement time?
I was on my snowblower this afternoon out in the driveway. Summers are different, obviously. I've had the opportunity to get reacquainted with some old high school friends, and we have a weekly gathering at the golf course, and try to go out and hit the ball a little bit. I'm still writing books. I've had 3 published so far. The 3rd one came out in November, called Tough Guys, and I'm working on the 4th one right now. So I don't sit around staring at the walls on a winter day. I'm working on the 4th one now, and I've got a publisher that's been gracious enough to say, you keep writing them, we'll keep publishing them. So the plan is that's my retirement side hustle. I'm going to keep writing some books.
And Tough Guys was about enforcers in the NHL, right? What's the next one going to be about?
It's similar in format to Tough Guys. Like each tough guy had their own chapter. Terry O'Reilly, Dave Brown, Archie Henderson, PJ Stock. It's a similar format. In this one, working title is Mentors, and it's about coaches. And each coach has their own chapter, and we get an opportunity to talk about how they got into the business and what they did. A former Maine Mariner player is in there, John Paddock, who spent the last 2 years coaching Connor Bedard and getting him ready to be the next big thing in the National Hockey League. So I really wanted to and had a great time talking to John about what it was like coaching a guy like Connor Bedard.
Wow. Do you have some Bruins coaches in there?
Bruce Cassidy. I went down to the Cape and spent a couple of hours with him just a couple of weeks after he coached the Vegas Golden Knights to the Stanley Cup Championship. Right. I'm hoping to get in touch with Jim Montgomery. I'd love to talk to him. I love his story. I love the job that he's done, following Cassidy in that position. So Cassidy's already done. I'm hoping to get the chance to talk to Jim Montgomery as well.
And are you able to watch? I shouldn't say able. Is watching sports different for you now that you're not covering sports?
It's funny, the way I put it is I watch sports now because I want to, not because I have to. When I spent 30 years in sports talk radio, I had to watch every game, every night. I had to watch because I was doing a disservice to our listeners. I couldn't very well talk about the Red Sox game when I went on the air at 10 o'clock tomorrow morning if I didn't watch the Red Sox game and what went on and what happened and what was the big play in the 5th inning. And so for years and years, and don't get me wrong, I love sports. I love watching sports, but I had to watch. Now I watch because I want to watch. And there were times during this Patriots season where I didn't want to watch as much and probably didn't.
And now that you don't have to be objective and you don't have to be professional, I was going to put you on the spot a little bit and ask you to be an armchair quarterback like the rest of us are when we would call into your show, probably.
Sure.
I think the first question I have for you is Mac Jones the QB of the future or not?
No, I don't think he is. I've seen enough. And I'm not trying to make this sound like this was all Mac Jones' fault, because it wasn't. But no, I don't think he's the quarterback of the future. I think the quarterback for the future for the Patriots is not on the team right now.
And so what do the Patriots need to do first? Is the first thing to get a quarterback, or is there something else they need to do? That
you got to start there. If I know anything about watching the National Football League for all these years, if you don't have a quarterback, you don't have a chance. And with all due respect to Bailey Zappi and Mac Jones, they don't have a quarterback. They've got to start there. Whether they sign a free agent quarterback, bring back Jimmy Garoppolo, whatever you want to, I would prefer they draft a quarterback with the 3rd overall pick, Jaden Daniels or somebody like that. That's what I prefer they do. And I think that's in my opinion, that's their quickest route back to some respectability.
And I know you were saying that calling hockey was your favorite sport. So the Bruins had this historic season last year, and then a lot of people thought it was an incredible disappointment to get beat in the
It
first
was.
round. So do you think they can go further than that this year, or and what has to happen?
Um, I don't know. Well, can they go further? That wouldn't be hard. You got to get through the first round, and you've gone further. Because last year was so gut-wrenchingly disappointing. Uh, it, I went into this season thinking that it might be a bit of a rebuild for this team. You don't lose Patrice Bergeron and David Krejci, your top two centers, at least my opinion was, and not suffer for it. To their credit, they've been better than I thought they'd be. They've got great goaltending, and that's been a lot of what has saved them the first half of the season. They've got two number one goaltenders, as is clear to anybody who watches the game. And they've got some guys who have really stepped up their games this year. Charlie Coyle, Trent Frederick, guys like that. So they have surprised me, truthfully. I didn't think they'd be quite as strong as they've been so far. I hope they can continue it. I hope Don Sweeney can add something to it at or near the trade deadline as well.
And when you're talking about the Bruins, the goaltending, um, it has been remarkable to watch those two guys the last couple of years, both playing like number one goalies and both seeming to genuinely, feel good about the other one doing well. And you see them hug, and you hear the broadcasters say, these guys really seem to like each other. So you've seen a lot of uh, teams where people say, "Oh, this team has the intangibles. This team has, they have a great feeling for each other." What do you think? Is that real? What we see with these
I
two
can tell you,
goalies?
no, it is absolutely real. It is not an act. They genuinely love each other. Uh, the story from the holiday season was that Jeremy Swayman puts on the full Santa suit and goes over and plays Santa for Linus Olmark's kids.
Huh.
And that's real. I mean, that's what he did and what he does. They love each other. They push each other in a good way, not in a bad way. They have two legitimate number one all-star caliber goalies. Linus was an all-star, a year ago. Jeremy's an all-star this year. Linus won the Vezina Trophy. They're that good, and they genuinely do love each other and play for each other.
And one of my other armchair quarterback question would be, what are the odds that Chris Sale wins the Cy Young Award for Atlanta?
I wouldn't think they'd be very strong, and I really like Chris Sale a lot. I have rarely seen an athlete more accountable than he was during his time here. His body just couldn't help him out. He kept getting hurt. He kept breaking down. I hope I'm wrong. I hope he's healthy as a horse, and I wish him nothing but the best. But the last few years have told you chances are something's going to happen to the poor guy. So I would say the odds of him winning the Cy Young are probably fairly slim.
Okay, so for this last one, try to really put yourself in the shoes of some of your most enthusiastic callers over the years, especially Red Sox callers, right? Who are maybe the most passionate callers when it comes to trades and moves. But if you're the general manager of the Red Sox, what's the one trade you're going to go out and make, or the one guy you're going to go out and get?
I don't think they are. I think that ownership has put some financial restrictions on the new general manager. They are bound and determined. They're not going to go over the luxury tax threshold. By the way, this is something the Yankees did a couple of years ago as well, to reset the luxury tax threshold, and you can't go over a certain amount of money. The Red Sox under John Henry's ownership have spent a lot of money, have spent a ton of money. They had a $200 million payroll last year, but I don't get the sense that they're going to go out and make that big free agent signing. We've already seen the big free agents go already in this offseason. I don't get the sense they're going to go out and make the big trade. I'm not sure that they've got a larder full of chips to trade off for other stars from other teams right now anyway. I think this is a legitimate, full-blown, top-to-bottom rebuild for the Red Sox.
I think we're going to take questions now for the remainder
Sure.
of the time. And I'm sure people know that when you started out at EEI, you worked with Eddie Andelman, who was quite a legendary figure himself in sports media. So somebody wants to know, what is your best Eddie Andelman story?
Carla, I don't know if I've got any Eddie Endelman stories necessarily. Uh, they put us together. Glenn Ordway took over as the program director. Eddie was doing afternoon drive. Glenn put himself in the afternoon drive position and put Eddie on middays with me. Uh, Eddie hated it. He was being demoted from afternoon drive. He was being stuck with a partner that he didn't necessarily want. Not that he disliked me or anything, but that wasn't what he wanted. And then the ratings went through the roof. And he ended up signing a 5-year contract extension. And I ended up signing a 5-year contract extension. And, things, people got a kick out of it. We were about as opposite as opposites could get. He's the guy who wanted to fill the net with pudding, the hockey net with pudding, so you could tell if the puck went in the net or not. And of course, I was a hockey guy. We probably didn't see eye to eye on anything sports wise, and for some reason, people got a kick out of listening to it.
What do you think were some of the things that made him a favorite among fans, made him popular?
He was everyman. I think people thought that he was everyman. You heard that thick Boston accent that he had. He really he may not have started the genre, but he definitely perfected it with the Sports Huddle, with Mark Whitkin and Jim McCarthy, and the three co-hosts of the Sports Huddle back in the day. He was a legend in Boston for a long, long time, and deserved to be so.
And speaking of legends, here in Maine on TV and radio, when you were calling Mariners games in the AHL, you worked with Frank Fixeris, and somebody would like to ask. Actually, it said that when you were working with Frank Fixeris, you quote Tom McVie a lot. Do you have any good McVie stories to convey?
Tommy McVie, I'm very happy to say this and have said it all the time. Other than my dad, Tom McVie has had more of an effect on me than any other man in my life. I love the guy. He's 88 or 89 years old now and could probably, drop on the floor here and give you 25 quick push-ups as it is. But he's a funny guy. He's got a great sense of humor. He's got that big, deep baritone voice of his. And I love everything about him. Bobby Orr just howls about Tom McVie. Tommy was starting in the Bruins organization as the coach of the Dayton Gems, I think they were. And Bobby was, a kid, just making his way. And Tommy would coach him at training camp. And they would, cut up and have fun. And McVie he is an unbelievable hockey presence. I was part of a group that tried very hard last summer to get Tommy elected into the Hockey Hall of Fame in the Builders category. And unfortunately, we fell a little short on that. But I think he belongs there. I think he deserves to be there. And I love the guy.
And moving to a different topic, now that you've moved back to Midcoast Maine, what are some of your favorite restaurants in Brunswick?
We don't go out to eat as much as you'd think. I mean, it's winter in Maine, Joshua's is a place down on Main Street that we always, it's kind of the local gathering place for a lot of people. I love places up the coast, Booth Bay. I tell this story, people think I'm nuts. I mean, I grew up here. I lived here for years and years and years. And we'd go up Route 1, even when we were playing sports. And I never took a right. Until I moved back to Maine here a year and a half ago, I'd never been to Damariscotta. And a year and a half ago, I went to Damariscotta for the first time, and I went, "Holy crap, this place is great!" And there's great places to eat there. My son and I like to go sit on the dock there and have oysters in the summertime. And I'm a big seafood guy. Probably the other reason I wanted to move back to Maine. So show me a place with good seafood, and I'm probably your guy to go there.
What do you think the future holds for Boston sports talk radio? Do you think it's going to turn into a one-station town, with the second station playing the role of the Boston Herald?
It's a good question. I have not had anything to do with EEI and its parent company Odyssey since I retired March 12th, almost 3 years ago now. But I did note that Odyssey filed for bankruptcy recently. I don't know what that means for the future. I know that they have a very large broadcast contract with the Boston Red Sox, and there are some media reports that I've read out there that says that the Red Sox may be taking the rights in-house following this season. It's a good question. 98.5 has become the juggernaut, and we were the juggernaut for years and years, and then they came along and took over the mantle, and deservedly so. They've killed it. What it means for the future for EEI, I don't know. I put a lot of time, sweat, and tears into the place, and I certainly hope that it continues to survive. A lot of good people work there, and but the future sounds a little iffy right now.
In your years of covering the Celtics specifically, what player did you find the most interesting and why?
Oh, good question. It wouldn't necessarily be Bird, just because he was a bit reticent to even talk at times. You know what? Of the people that I talked with and dealt with, maybe Ray Allen, an extremely intelligent man, fascinating to talk to. I got a kick out of it, every time we would interview him. Ray might be one of those guys that might be one of those interesting people that I've dealt with over the course of covering the team over the years.
And of all the championships that Boston sports teams have won while you've been covering Boston sports, which is the one that meant the most or was the most memorable to you?
I mean, it's easy to say the Bruins, and I'm not going to say it because that was the year I wasn't working with the team and for the team. I watched it as a fan. I will say very quickly, though, I was calling a Red Sox Tampa Bay Rays game the night of Game 7, and we were in Tampa. Saw this great one-hit wonder, and as soon as the game ended, all the players piled into the bus, and we raced back to the hotel. And they had set aside this little courtyard restaurant bar type thing for all the guys. And I watched the Bruins clinch the Stanley Cups surrounded by Boston Red Sox players in Tampa Bay.
Huh.
And as the final horn sounded and the Bruins were winning the cup, the bartender put a glass of red wine in front of me. And I said, "Oh, I didn't order this, thank you." And he said, "No, that man did over there." And I looked over, and Tim Wakefield had his glass of wine in his hand, and he went like this, and he knew what it meant to me, and he knew that it was an emotional time for me.
Wow.
But I've got to say, and I love Tim Wakefield, by the way. We could go another 2 hours talking about him. I would say probably it was the Red Sox, and breaking the curse, because it meant so much to so many people. The Patriots Super Bowl win in New Orleans was unbelievable. It was otherworldly. But the Patriots breaking the curse of the Bambino probably is the one that will stick with me the longest.
And one viewer wants to know, or wants you to talk a little bit about your jersey or the Arnold. We assume that's you, the Bruins jersey back there.
The night that we announced my retirement, Charlie Jacobs from the Bruins and Sean McGrail, my boss at NESN, came on between periods, and that the jersey was presented to me by Charlie Jacobs of the Bruins on behalf of the team. The 23 is not because that was my number. I never wore 23, but that's the year I retired as one of the broadcasters for the Bruins. So they gave me that night, and it's going to hang there as long as I'm in this house.
And you were saying before we went on that that's the only piece of sports memorabilia you have hanging in that room. Is that right?
Yep. I told you, I joked. My wife said this is not going to become a man cave, and it isn't. Although I do have a bar. Does that count as part of a man cave? That was here.
I
when I
think
got there.
so.
Yeah, no, we don't have a lot. I've got a bunch in boxes in the basement. Someday, if I ever, put an office in the basement, we'll try to figure out where to put some of this stuff. Because I have to admit, there's a picture of me and Ray Bork and Larry Bird signed by both of them the day that I
Wow.
introduced them, which I'd like to hang up somewhere at some point. So, there are things like that in boxes in the basement right now.
Uh, Somebody would like to know, says you've been very open about growing up in Maine. How has that grounded you in your life?
Well, as I said, I was the oldest of 5 kids growing up in a mobile home in rural Maine. Um, you can't get more grounded than that. Um, the story I tell is that Bowdoin let me in, and then I thought, I can't go here. And I went and met with the director of financial aid at Bowdoin, and I said, "Listen, I've made a huge mistake. You've let me in. I applied and everything, but I can't afford to come here. I don't have the money." And he looked at me and he said, "Dale, we wouldn't have let you in if we weren't going to let you stay." And they gave me abundant financial aid that made my Bowdoin education possible. Uh, Certainly, the kind of education that kid growing up in rural Maine could not have even dreamed of, as a young kid. So when my son eventually became a student at Bowdoin, I paid 4 years of bust out retail and was happy to do it.
Uh, have you stayed in touch with any of the Maine Mariner alumni? And are there any special moments from those years that stand out?
Oh God, there's so many. Winning the Calder Cup championship in Rochester. It's interesting. The Mariners have been very gracious and have invited me to participate. They've got a Maine Mariners alumni event coming up, and if I get this date wrong, I apologize. I believe it's Saturday, January 27th. And they've got some Mariner alumni who are coming back, and they've very graciously asked me to be part of that group as well as a Mariner alumni. I'll get the opportunity to see some guys who I haven't seen for a long time. I did get to see Steve Tajura at a Bruins game a couple of years ago. He was down there, and uh, I, when I was around the Bruins, I would run into guys from time to time. Kevin Maxwell is a scout. Archie Henderson was a scout. Dave Brown was a scout. John Paddock, and I would get to see those guys from time to time at the Garden. But there are a number of them, we're Facebook friends, but I haven't had a chance to see them in person yet. And I'm really looking forward to whoever's going to be there for this Mariner alumni event coming up later this month.
Will you be doing any book signings for any of your books in the area?
I'm going to do one. I'm going to do one that day before the game. The Mariners are going to set me up at a table in the lobby there at the Cross Insurance Arena. When my first book came out, the Mariners did that for me, and in fact, I dropped the puck before the game. First time I'd ever done that, but I signed in the lobby. Then I'll be signing books on the 27th before the Mariners alum. And I don't know what else they've got planned for the alumni, but I'll be signing books there that day.
And we have one more question. And you had brought up Tim Wakefield, and you had said that you could talk about him for a couple hours. This person wants to know if you think the Red Sox should snub Curt Schilling for the 20th anniversary of 04 because of his behavior surrounding Wakefield and his illness.
Yes. And for people who don't know, and I hate to even dredge this back up, Curt Schilling is the one who told the world that Tim Wakefield was suffering from brain cancer. And in fact, he even said, "I'm not sure if Tim wants me to say this," and then said it anyway. It seems pretty simple to me. If Tim wanted that word out there, he should have been the one who put it out there. It shouldn't have been Curt Schilling. He had no right, in my opinion, to tell the world what Tim was going through at the time. And Tim was not with us very long after that. His cancer progressed very quickly, and he succumbed much sooner than most of us expected. But no, Curt had no right and should not have done what he did.
And the fact that Wakefield did not make it public and did not, I guess, burden the world with his illness, Is that sort of, does that make sense to you and everything that you knew about him as a player and a person?
Tim was very, very active over the years with the Jimmy Fund, as I have been for years and years. He was always there helping kids and bringing a smile to a child's face and raising spirits. It is something that meant a lot to him. But he was involved in so many other charitable endeavors as well. There are a few athletes in the history of Boston sports that I've dealt with who did more and gave more of their time and effort on behalf of others. And there's a great video. The Jimmy Fund every spring would send a bunch of kids, Jimmy Fund kids, down to spring training. And there's a video of a young man who couldn't walk very well because of his cancer treatment. And Tim Wakefield putting this kid literally on his back and piggyback carrying him down to the field. By the way, not a 6-year-old. This guy was like 14, 15 years old. And Tim picked him up like he was a little kid and lugged him down to the field so that he could be a part of it with everybody else. I said I could talk about Tim Wakefield for hours and hours. There are few, if any, better people than he is, in my opinion.
Well, Dale, thank you very much for answering our questions and for spending this time with us. And for those of you who want to know about the Maine Mariners Alumni Night that Dale will be at with his books, it's in our chat. We have the link to it there. Again, I want to thank Dale. I want to thank all of you for being here tonight. And remember that this is being recorded, so if you want to watch it another time, you can. And now I would like to throw it back to to Lisa DeSisto, who has a few more remarks. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dale and Ray. I knew it was going to be a great conversation, and I feel like it could have gone on all evening. 2 things I wanted to say to you. 1, have you gotten a copy of our beautiful 2024 calendar featuring the work of our photojournalists? If you haven't, here are 2 ways for you to get it. 1, you can join us at the Press Herald's Photos of the Year exhibit at the Portland Public Library on Friday, February 2nd at 5 p.m., where you can meet our photojournalists and also have some cheese cubes and pick up your calendar. If you can't make it, when you get the survey from Strawberry, our executive producer of Maine Voices Live, just pop your name in the survey and your address, and we will mail one off to you. And you can have it hanging up just in time for February. Thank you again for being with us, and I look forward to seeing you in person very soon.